Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I've been learning, or that we've been talking about in my philosophy of science class, which is feminism in philosophy of science, or feminist philosophy of science. It's been an interesting week. It seems like even my TA is a little bit apprehensive about considering this to be a serious topic, because what the hell could feminism have to do with science? Basically, what we've been told in this class, is that feminism or more accurately, women are necessary in science because, sorry about all the background noise. There's a guy on a little moped in front of me and it's making a lot more noise than it should. But feminism in science, or feminism in the philosophy of science, we've been studying the virtues of feminism in science, or the benefits of involving women in science. And the example that they gave was that basically men have certain biases, women have other biases, and therefore when you bring them together, the biases will cancel out, and the result will be a better scientific theory. And the example that they gave was, I guess back in the 50s and 60s or 70s, it was back in the last century, there were a group of male scientists studying the behavior of mating patterns in gorillas or chimpanzees or something like that. And the male scientists focused primarily on the male chimpanzees. And once they got female scientists working on the project, and the female scientists decided to look at the behavior of the female chimpanzees to decide how important, how crucial their behavior was, what role their behavior played in the mating, because the male scientists apparently had this extremely chauvinistic, misogynist view that the mating practices between chimpanzees was primarily determined by the behavior of the male chimp. And so by bringing in these females, they had this wonderful female perspective that opened up a whole new realm of observation, where now we can see how the female chimpanzees actually were crucial, and they were the ones coming up with the deciding factor on which chimpanzees mated with who and whatnot. And I mean, that's the fact that they were even able to construct this narrative is hilarious to me. Like, this is one of the most ridiculous narratives that I've ever heard in my life. And it assumes a couple things. It assumes, and I brought this up in my lecture, it assumes that men all have the same sorts of biases, and women all have different sorts of biases. So women all have the same biases, or similar biases in general. Men all have similar biases in general. And so you need to have some men and some women. Otherwise, you're always going to have biases. You're always going to have the male bias, this male bias. And, you know, it's always funny when they put things in those terms, because feminism always claims that men and women are equal. But then when you actually get into the nitty-gritty details like this, and like something like the philosophy of science, you discover that they actually strongly believe in stereotypes. They love to stereotype. And the stereotype is typically that men are pig-headed and stubborn, and they only care about themselves, they don't care about women, and that women are more sensitive, and they'll come in and they'll see what the men missed, and It's all nonsense. So, they're basically saying that there's no men out there, not a single male scientist out there, who could notice how crucial, like, the female element of this chimpanzee mating ritual was. Like, men are so biased to only seeing men as an actor, or only seeing men as the important part, that they're never going to look at the women, no matter how obvious, no matter how important it is. So we have stereotypes being promoted. And on top of that, what if women don't want to get into science? They talk about how male-dominated science has been throughout the centuries, and how women have been considered less logical and less oriented to mathematics. What if they just don't want to? What if that's not part of their nature? What if because I know a lot of women, many of the women in my family, for instance, don't like math. They're not logically minded in the scientific mathematical sense. Should we force them to get into science because we need the 50-50 spread of men and women so that our biases cancel out? Liberals and feminists and Marxists in particular, people who believe that just changing the material conditions, just rearranging the demographics, whatnot, rearranging the social environment, that will have some huge impact on our successes or on our achievements. They treat people like pawns. They treat people like they're just inanimate objects to be moved around, and all we have to do is just move more women into science and we'll have better science. We just need to promote women in science. Like, how has that been working? Haven't they been promoting women in science for decades now? And the numbers don't seem to be rising. The numbers, don't seem to be matching their expectations. So, when feminism infiltrates something like science, we're no longer concerned with the actual methodology of coming up with rational explanations for phenomena, to understand how reality really works, to really get to the underlying factors and mechanisms that cause the phenomena of our experience. That's no longer the main concern. The main concern is, who are you and what are your biases? Are you a white male? Then you're going to have white male biases. And this whole idea of biases and preconceptions, those should be dropped the moment we enter into the scientific arena. Those don't matter anymore. It doesn't matter if you're a man, doesn't matter if you're a woman, doesn't matter if you're 12 years old or 99 years old, doesn't matter if you're black or white or Asian or Hispanic, doesn't matter. What matters is that your theory is rational, that it explains something. That's what matters. Oh, my phone fell. I had to make a quick turn and my phone fell. And we're back. But in this issue of pointing out certain biases, like men have these biases, women have other biases, it depends fully on your perspective. Like I saw this video of South Africans, these black women, not just women, but black people in South Africa, who are claiming that science is a white construct, a construct of Eurocentrism, and that South Africa doesn't need our stinking European science. And science is the one thing that is meant to be universal. It's the one thing that is meant to be about everything other than ourselves, about just the way things are in reality. And to think that there's a male reality, a female reality, a white reality, those are not scientific concepts. I get that there is a social component to that in our social lives, men act differently from women. Whites act differently from blacks. Asians act differently from Arabs. There's a social life component of it, but science is not our social lives. Science has nothing to do with our social lives, and our social status it's not relevant to science. So to act as though we'll do better science just because we've incorporated women into the process is laughable to anybody serious. I cannot believe that this social justice warrior nonsense has crept its way even into the philosophy of science. It's unbelievable to me. It's hard even to speak up in class, because I brought up the whole point of like, hey, aren't you saying that men, in the point about the chimpanzees, the study of the chimpanzees, I raised my hand in class and said, aren't you saying basically that there's these stereotypes about men and women that are true, that men have certain biases, that women have other biases, and that, men all basically think the same way and women all think a different way? Isn't that basically what you're saying? And he goes, no. It's more about the statistics, about how statistically on average men will have certain biases and women will have other biases and whatnot. And it's just missing the point completely. The point is that no matter what the science is, when you look at a scientific theory, when you look at a scientific theory, the author of the theory is absolutely irrelevant. You should look at every scientific theory as authored by anonymous. Always look at every scientific theory as authored by anonymous. The person who wrote it doesn't matter. If the theory makes sense, if it's rational, then it's rational no matter who wrote it. So this idea of getting women into science, once again, it's playing God. It's treating people like pawns. It's saying, we'll just move you from here to there. We'll influence you to get into here. We'll influence you to get into there. And once we have enough women, then science will be good. Once we have the perfect mix of diversity, then we'll be able to understand the underpinnings of reality. So absurd. Thank you for listening.